welcome to the Everyone Active podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jo.
Hello, I am your other host, Michelle. How are you?
Hello, Mishy.
Are you okay?
I love this.
I love you. You're here.
I'm here. Yes. How are you? How are those pups?
Very well. My pups are very good. They're a bit crazy, but they're fine. Baxter was 9 last week, so he's...
9? I'm sorry.
I know. So he's 9. Brody's still only 2, but is Baxter A, sensible now he's 9, or B, still stupid?
Oh, that's amazing. You know what? I have to tell you, I've got my brother's dog still, so I've now got 2 dogs. Met up with people from uni over the weekend, did a country walk. So we're on a walk. I'm like, okay, this is a little bit dodgy. My Hetty leaps over, puddles, anything. She's gone. She's like, no, I'm in it. I can avoid it. I'm going to jump it. Poppy is a little miniature cockapoo. She's 10. There was like the bottom of a sty, but not the whole thing. She went, I can do this. I'm like Hetty. I jump and landed smack in the puddle the other side of it. I was like, oh. And she just literally stood
Did she look
in
at
this
you
puddle
as if to
as
say,
if
help me?
that didn't happen to Hetty. Why did that happen to me?
Bless her.
You
What
know,
did Hetty do? Did she just look at her?
Yeah, and just gave her a and off. Yeah, done.
Bless her.
But countryside walks,
I love that.
flowers,
Flowers.
nectar,
Yeah.
sugar.
Oh, that's good. Do you know what?
What?
You are good. That's an excellent segue for
Thank
today's
you. Thank
podcast.
you. We have with us the lovely Jane Bains. Hello, Jane.
Hello. Thank you for joining us.
Jane is our resident registered nutritionist. Welcome, Jane.
Welcome.
you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you
How
for
are
inviting me.
you?
I'm good. Yeah, really good to be here. Thank
How's
you for inviting
your
me.
week been?
Busy, prepping for this podcast.
Has it? Now, is this your home site? Is Harpenden? We're at
Yes.
Harpenden today, so Team Harps High. This is your home
Yes,
site.
it is.
Excellent.
Yes. Yeah.
So the team can see you on the pod.
Yes, definitely. So, Jane, just talk to us about your background. So
Yes.
you were recently a personal trainer, but years and years and years and years before that, you are a...
Yes, so I'm a registered nutritional therapist and I've
Wow.
been qualified for almost 15 years. And I trained at the Institute for Optimum Nutrition, which was founded by Patrick Holford many, many years ago. And I studied a diploma and foundation degree. And I'm registered with BANT, the British Association for Nutrition and Lifestyle Medicine.
So with all of that qualification, I know that you are sitting there in your personal trainer top.
Yes.
But theoretically, when we do our level 3 personal training, we do a nod to nutrition, but it falls within our personal training. But I
Okay.
just want to make a huge point that your 15 years previous
Yeah.
to becoming a personal trainer, your study of nutrition means that you can actually prescribe nutritional plans to the general public.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's amazing to have on your team, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely epic.
Lucky to have
Yeah.
you.
So people can come to us and talk to me about what's the carbohydrate do and what does the fat
Yes.
do. But when we're talking about, okay, this is what's happening to my body, is food possibly affecting this? That is not something that a personal trainer
It doesn't
can
fall into your
answer.
remit, does it?
No,
Yeah,
not
no.
at all.
No.
But you are
totally
a
in your wheelhouse.
qualified nutritionist, and that's what you can do. So we
Yes.
have brought you here today to talk about sugar. And sugar. Can you just, so people know, what actually is the amount of sugar that one person should have a day, and what does that portion look like?
A very small amount, in fact.
Wow.
If we think about how much the body can cope with at any one time, is 4 grams, which is a teaspoon. It's minute.
Yeah.
Far less than all of us consume on a daily basis. So it's about, if you are having sugar, it's about spreading the load over the course of the day, but ideally keeping it to a minimum. As we would have as hunter-gatherers, we would have picked berries as and when they're in season, and they
Right.
wouldn't have been very sweet. So we wouldn't have had much sugar. We would have been eating all of the animal, very, very little sugar, if any, and it would have been sugar to an absolute minimum.
Yeah, and that's a massive, massive point
Yeah,
to make.
absolutely.
We are
Yeah.
still the same human physiology as we were
Yes.
thousands upon thousands of years ago. And you
Yeah.
said 4 grams of sugar. We're going to go later in and we're going to talk about what sugar does in the body
Yeah.
Yeah.
and what processes it through.
Can I ask a question though? What
Yeah.
is sugar?
So sugar, most people understand sugar to be the white crystals in
Yeah.
the sugar bowl on the table that you add to tea and coffee.
Yeah.
And that is sucrose, and that is a disaccharide. So that's 2 sugar units. fructose and glucose, a disaccharide which makes up sucrose. But sugar comes in other forms. You will find glucose in plant foods, in nuts and seeds and vegetables, and fructose too. And fructose tends to be the sweeter of the two. And it's often added to foods to make them more palatable, which increases profits for food manufacturers.
Absolutely.
And it makes us crave those foods even more and want to eat more. And therein lies the problem.
Yeah. So going back to our physiology, and it would have been hunter-gatherers, seasonal, so fruits weren't available all the time. But also, it was more, if there was a beehive, it was probably for survival mode, and you found that sugar, and you know that, well, they could have been hundreds, if not thousands of meters, miles away from where they knew their next food source was coming from. So it's a quick hit for the human body to enable us to kind of keep going.
Yes.
What is that effect in the human body? What does sugar actually do the moment we consume it?
Okay, so when you ingest sugar, that means actually taking it into the body, so not digesting it, but actually ingesting its sugar, and it makes its way into the stomach, and then it's broken down. It makes its way into the small intestine. It's digested into the bloodstream. We then see a spike in glucose.
Right.
So the body will have converted whatever form of sugar you're eating, whether that was flours as in the form of a starch, or, as I said, sucrose, it's fructose and glucose molecules. The body has to break those down, convert them into glucose, because it's glucose that is fed into the Krebs cycle. So we're breaking down the sugars into glucose. They're absorbed into the bloodstream. The bloodstream very tightly regulates blood sugar, has to. It's a survival mechanism. So whilst we need sugar, we don't want too much of it. So the body releases from the pancreas via the beta cells insulin, which tightly regulates the glucose concentration within the bloodstream. And what happens is the glucose is taken out of the bloodstream and either utilized for energy. Any excess is put into the muscles and stored into the liver as glycogen for emergency stores, basically. And the extra is stored as fat in adipose tissue. So we're very, very well versed in how we manage sugar. But the problem is, it's when we are repeating that cycle over time that we run into problems.
So it is. We are still the same as we were when our ancestors used to have to take it, and the body's designed to store it in case of a need, in case of a emergency.
Yes. Or a fast.
Or a fast. But it's there still to give us energy. But that was once in a blue moon, they potentially found a bee's nest. They potentially found some berries. It wasn't an everyday.
It wasn't every day.
It certainly wasn't an on the hour. And it certainly wasn't as regularly available as it is now.
Yeah.
So you've just spoken briefly about where we store this sugar.
Yeah.
What happens when... Because let's face it, probably every single person we know has more than that 4 grams of sugar a day. Where does it go? What does it do? Because I'm guessing these stores can't store for forever.
No. Okay, so once the glucose is circulating, as I've mentioned, the beta cells, the pancreas release the insulin, mops up the glucose, takes it and puts it where it's needed, where it's the liver, the muscles, into fat stores. It literally is the fat stores that mop up the excess.
Right.
So where you have excess, where you have insulin, you have fat storage, ultimately. So if we're looking to, say, lose fat, body fat, and we've got circulating insulin, you cannot be doing the two things at the same time. So in order to burn body fat, we need to really bring down that insulin load in the body. So it's stored as fat. So that is what happens. We start, putting fat all over, but also visceral fat. So that really unhealthy fat around the body, the middle of the body, around the organs, is where we store the fat as well. It's inflammatory, very inflammatory, that fat.
And are you seeing a massive, increase of people now being aware of sugar, or do you think people are still unaware of how sugar is hidden within our food industry?
I think there is a greater awareness of sugar and that it's detrimental, but I don't think people understand, where sugar, as you say, is hidden in all the different types of foods. So we'll often think about, we know that tropical fruits, for instance, are higher in sugar. They're grown in kind of more temperate climates. The potential to increase the sugar content is greater. And we know that because they're sweeter foods, aren't they? We want more of them. And then you've got things like berries. They're lowering the glycemic load, so they're less sweet. They impact our blood sugar less, although the things we can do to mitigate that further. But I think people are just not aware. I mean, you look at a tub of soup and it contains sugar.
I know, it's the hidden, isn't it? That's
Yes.
the thing.
It's the hidden, and you think, well, why? Why do you need to put sugar in soup? So we add salt because it's a preservative, and then we need to mask the salt, so we add sugar. It also, on a level that we're not really aware of, it's those receptors in the brain, we are sensing the sweetness. So it's on a level that we are not even aware of. We're not sensing, we can't necessarily taste the sugar, but it's there and it's doing something with our brain, it's playing with our
And
mechanics.
physiologically, what's happening if we are taking in too much sugar? What's happening to us?
We are, so we with an excess of sugar, you get that dopamine hit, which is why we crave sugar. It's so concentrated, the impact and the way it affects our brain physiology. So that dopamine hit keeps us going back for more, wanting more.
Well, it's an addiction.
It's
Yeah,
an
so
addiction.
dopamines are one of our happy hormones.
hormones,
Yes.
And it's also the, I want more.
Yeah.
Or I can
Associated
crave a
with
little bit more.
addiction.
Yes.
And in rodent studies, they have shown that when presented with cocaine and sugar, at the same time, it's the sugar that the rodents will
Wow.
go to over cocaine, which is really incredible. It just shows how addictive it is. And food manufacturers know that, and they use that to their advantage.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an awareness, isn't it? We all think about, we kind of know what we eat, but it is, as you've said, our food manufacturers now, we've spoken about this on various other podcasts, but 57% of the UK diet is ultra processed
Yeah, it's incredible.
food.
Yeah.
And as we've got you on here, can
Yeah.
you just define what ultra processed food is?
Okay, so it's, if you were to look at the ingredients list on a packet, and there's things on there that you don't recognise, or even it's not something you could reproduce in your kitchen, it's typically ultra processed.
Wow.
Yeah. So even if we're looking
yeah.
at like sometimes brought bread, if
Oh,
we're making
absolutely.
bread at home,
Yeah.
we might put a pinch of salt in it, but we're
Yeah.
not putting overload of salt in
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
And then we're not overloading the sugar
Sugar,
to
yeah, yeah.
counteract that. So it's
Exactly.
learning really to read those labels.
Yeah.
Because if it's the 4 grams, then it's definitely hidden.
But it's also misleading because when you look at the macronutrient content on the food label, which makes it a little bit easier to identify sugars. But if you look at the ingredients list and you're looking for sugar, the manufacturers are really clever because they introduce sugar in lots of different forms. So it could be introduced in 5 or 6, for instance, different
Can you
forms.
let our listeners know what they are?
Yeah, give us a couple of them.
Oh.
so
Or
we can look out
examples of
for.
them.
So you can have brown rice syrup, you could have mannitol, you could have
Wow.
dextrose, all names that we're familiar with, but we don't really know that
What
they
they
are
are.
forms of sugar. And so they're listed in smaller quantities because if you remember, the biggest ingredient has to be the one that appears first on the
first,
ingredient
yeah.
list. So it would probably be sugar, but because they introduce it in lots of different forms, they appear further down the list. So it's hidden in plain
So
sight,
what
basically.
should we be looking for? If we're looking on the back of a packet, what sort of things should we be looking for?
So we want to be eating foods that contain proteins and fats and minimal sugars. So when you're looking at the label and you're looking at so it will show you the carbohydrate content and it will show you the sugar content. So I mean that's a really good indicator. If it's more than 4 grams, you know that actually the body's going to be really struggling with that food. And if that's assuming that food is eaten in isolation. If it's part of a meal or a snack with other foods that contain sugar, you're probably already eating too much.
Wow.
But then it's better to buy food that's not in packets.
Yes.
So you don't have, food that's packaged in nature. Nature is very, very clever. The way it packages sugar with fibres, for instance, and then fibre slows down release of those sugars into the bloodstream. It's a more manageable way. It's how we've evolved.
Yeah.
Food packaged in nature.
Definitely. Can we talk about that? Because I've seen a trend, and I know that you,
Yeah.
and you. Thank you for joining us at Harpenden, by the way, on the
Thank
gym
you.
floor. Is people are walking around with glucose monitors on.
Yes.
Yes.
People are much more aware of glucose, aren't
But
they?
are we? Or are we going
think it's
around
going
with,
with the trend, do you
glucose
think?
monitors just because somebody else
trendy,
is?
do you think?
What is glucose? What's its role in the body? And what are people actually monitoring?
Okay. So glucose, so the preferred fuel of the brain is glucose. So we need glucose for the brain, we absolutely do. But we don't need to eat glucose because what we need to remember is that glucose is a carbohydrate. It's one of our 3 macronutrients along with proteins and fats. So we've got carbohydrates, proteins and fats. Fats, you've got 2 essential fats, omega-3 and omega-6. And they're essential because you have to take them exogenously from outside of the organism.
Okay.
You can't make them within the body. Proteins as well, of the number of, there's a number of essential amino acids, 9, and you have to obtain them from food. You can't manufacture them within the body. Carbohydrates, on the other hand, you don't need them. You can make them via a process called gluconeogenesis, which is making new glucose from fats, the essential fats or fats in general, and the proteins. So you don't need to eat carbohydrates because we can make them. So you've got, for instance, the Inuits. They were not eating sugar, but they could make sugar from other fuel sources within the body. So we just need to remember that we don't need to consume glucose, but we also need to remember that in order to break down fats and proteins into glucose that the brain can use and other obviously cells in the body, we have to be metabolically flexible. We have to be able to do that. And that's quite difficult. Well, it shouldn't be difficult, but because of the way we live our lives and the foods that we eat, we're not used to doing that. So, for instance, breaking down the various fuels into ketones that would feed the brain. It's not something we find easy unless you're following, for instance, a ketogenic diet and you've trained your body to do that over time. But you can take in glucose and it can fuel the brain, and there are instances where, or the muscle cells, for instance, and there are instances where that is quite helpful. So if you are very, very active, you will be able to tolerate, for instance, a banana before or after your workout. Whereas somebody trying to burn body fat, who maybe has an issue with their weight and they're looking to lose weight, that's not the best food for them. But it's about context.
So when we're tracking glucose, so there's, I guess, some foods that people consume on a day-to-day basis that they don't necessarily, they might see as healthy because it's been marketed as healthy.
Yes.
A big one being breakfast cereal.
Yes. Huge one being breakfast cereals. So, breakfast cereals are typically quite cheap to manufacture. And they're an easy option for people. And as you say, they've been marketed as a healthy option, but they are probably the least healthy breakfast option available. And, that's evidenced by the fact when you are wearing your glucose monitor that your blood sugar will likely spike incredibly high. Which is an eye-opener for people because it's a real surprise. Because they think, especially when you're feeding your children breakfast cereals and you think you're doing good by them. But actually it's probably one of the, as I said, the worst breakfast things you could be eating.
And it's even the ones where there's not, like it will say, no added sugar. So people are automatically going, there's no sugar in it.
Exactly.
Let's pop a bowl of this in front of. And then also there's another, can bring this in, full fat milk, skimmed milk, and the sugar difference between full fat milk and skimmed milk. People are going, I'm going to have skimmed milk because it's the healthier option, when actually it's not, because there's a combination of different types of foods going in.
Yes. So with whole milk, which, we think about the blue top, don't we? As you say, people avoid it because it's high in fat, but actually we need those fats. We need those fats for a number of reasons. One, again, the way things are packaged in nature, there's a reason. So we've got the fat-soluble vitamins in there, and we need a source of fat in order to absorb those fat-soluble vitamins, incredibly important for our bone health and other functions within the body. So we don't want to be taking out the fats. Also, it tastes pretty awful. Skim milk tastes bad. It's not good.
Not great, is it?
It's not great. And it's more satiating because you've got the fat elements, so fats and proteins, but fats in particular fill us up for longer, which means that they can get us from one meal to the next, without necessarily the need to snack and pick. Because, when we snack and pick, we often make maybe not the best choices and we can reach for those high sugar snacks. So they're satiating, they fill us up, and also they help to balance the blood glucose levels. And that's something that, is one of the strategies that we can use when we are trying to basically, we haven't talked about the blood sugar roller coaster, which we can talk about in a minute, but actually kind of trying to balance the blood glucose via the types of foods we're combining sugar-rich foods with.
So how could we manage our intake of glucose then, sort of practically, for people that are listening?
How do we avoid that roller coaster that you've just... So the roller coaster is we're peaking, we're troughing, we're peaking, we're troughing. And I'm guessing when we're troughing, we're craving.
We're craving.
And so we're grabbing any food, probably a sugar food, because we know it's going to give us a quick rush.
We want to see more of a wave.
Rather than a sharp, spiky drop.
Exactly. And this wave is created because you are going to get slight peaks and troughs as you eat your meals and possibly snacks throughout the day, and stress also impacts. But when you're having a high sugar food or a meal that contains a lot of sugar, you're going to get a peak. The insulin comes along, released from the beta cells of the pancreas. The sugar levels drop as the sugar is taken out of the bloodstream. But insulin is so effective that we end up craving foods, sugary foods again, affects our mood, hungry, irritability, energy levels plummet. So we eat something else, it drives up the blood sugar, and we have this constant cycle.
Right.
And it's these spikes which are incredibly unhealthy. It's insulin that sort of sits behind a lot of the chronic metabolic diseases now that we know of the biggest killers within the population. So we need to minimise these spikes and basically glucose dump into the bloodstream. It's incredibly important.
Definitely.
Wow.
Can you just talk about, because we can see it and say it and all the statistics are there,
Yeah.
what are the diseases that you were talking about that are now becoming such common practice rather than a rarity?
Yeah, sure. So neurological conditions such as Alzheimer's and dementia, metabolic conditions, type 2 diabetes being one of them, pre-diabetes, insulin resistance, cancer and heart disease. They're the main ones. And if you think back, a number of years now, saturated fat was demonised.
Yes.
As the cause of atherosclerosis and heart disease. And we now know that obviously we have to be sensible about our fat intake and the types of fats we're eating, but actually it's sugar. So as we have people have reduced their fat intake in favour of sugar, we can see that the incidence of heart disease has increased.
Wow.
So it's evident to see, but obviously these things take time to come into the public domain. And I think it's just fantastic now that you've got people like the Glucose Goddess and Zoe
Yes.
who are, bringing things to the forefront and making people more aware of the implications of too much sugar within their diet.
Could you give our listeners some really good hacks that they can manage these with when they're out in the supermarkets?
Yes, so I'm pinching some of these from the Glucose Goddess, who herself kind of assimilated some of the research out there. So a number of things you can do. So one of the biggest things is, the food ordering. So the order in which you consume foods. So if I was to have for instance, a bar of chocolate on an empty stomach, that's going to spike my blood glucose levels. But if I was to have that bar of chocolate after a meal as a pudding or a dessert, the impact on my blood glucose levels is far reduced, minimised. So food ordering, really important. So having at the beginning of your meal, so you've got your food on your plate, having some vegetables to begin with.
Yep.
That creates a fibrous mesh within the gut. So it basically impedes the speed at which the glucose enters the bloodstream, which is incredibly important. And then follow the vegetables with your proteins and fats. Again, they take longer to be broken down and digested. And then your carbohydrates, if you're having carbohydrates. Bearing in mind, vegetables are carbohydrates, but we're talking more about the bread, the pasta, the long chain polysaccharides, which are glucose molecules, which are broken down in the bloodstream into glucose. So we are trying to reduce the speed at which they're hitting the bloodstream, and thereby reducing the need for as much insulin and such a glucose spike.
Can you just say that order again? Because I think that's quite fascinating for people to think or
Yes.
bring on board. So if
Yes.
we've got a plate of food in front of us,
Yes.
what are we eating first ideally?
So we're eating our fibre first, so that's our vegetables,
Okay.
followed by our proteins and or fats. So our proteins are our animal products, or our tofu, our eggs, the protein, the foods that will be broken down into amino acids.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then and also alongside that, fats. So your olive oil, your olives, salmon, which is a source of protein and fats, eggs. So you are just slowing down the release of those sugars into the bloodstream. There are a few other things we can do.
Ooh.
We can also, before a meal, so sort of 10 minutes before a meal, diluting a tablespoon of vinegar, and it can be any type of vinegar, because vinegar contains acetic acid, which blunts the glucose response.
Oh.
So diluting that in a glass of water, it's important to dilute it because we want to minimise the impact of any of the acid on our teeth enamel. So you consume that about 10 minutes before you have a meal, and that helps to blunt the glucose response. That's a really easy hack. Then we've talked about the food ordering. And one thing that's something I actually recommend to probably most of my PT clients, because it's so easy, is after a meal is to be active. So
Yeah.
you're going to have circulating glucose.
Right.
Give it a reason to be there. Use it up. So whether that be a brisk walk, walking the dog, some air squats, dancing, which is what I do quite frequently after a meal or during the day. So just being active, giving the glucose a reason to be used up, and then any excess, yes, will be mopped up and stored as needed. But hopefully, we will have been active enough. So it's about being active throughout the day. There's the exercise, snacking, all these things to help us be more metabolically flexible and healthy.
And you spoke earlier about giving kids sort of breakfast cereals and stuff. Have you got
Yeah.
any really good tips for people what great breakfast they can have to make sure that they're managing these levels?
Yes, sure. So ideally, we want to be consuming things that just do not consume added sugar. So I appreciate, you've got sugar in fruit, which is absolutely fine because we're having that fruit as hopefully part of a big meal. So eggs are such a fantastic go-to for breakfast.
Poached egg with avocado.
Yeah.
Come on.
Or a couple of poached eggs.
I could eat that now, actually.
Yeah. Fantastic. So you've got the protein and you've got the fats in the avocado. For some people, it could be a protein powder, people on the go coming to the gym that want a breakfast on the go. I have a protein shake every morning and that I put olive oil in there and berries. So, it's filling, it keeps me going for a good 3-4 hours minimum. You could have leftover dinner. And this is something I talk to clients about a lot. You could have your minced bolognese from the night before as a breakfast. It's just that we are so conditioned to think of breakfast being a breakfast cereal. But actually, if we think about, as hunter-gatherers, we would have hunted that animal and that's what we would have had for breakfast. And we've also got to think about circadian rhythm, how our body is primed to receive food in the morning.
So the circadian rhythm is how we wake up and how we fall asleep. So it's the release of hormones into our body to start waking us up. So it's our cortisol release to wake us up.
Yes.
And then when we're ready to rest, we've got melatonin.
Yes.
So how's that?
Exactly.
Working with foods.
Exactly. And it's driven by night and day. So it's our interaction, if you like, with the outside world, which unfortunately we spend a lot of time indoors with blue light, which is not so bad in the morning, but not so great later on. So it can affect how our body functions. But if we think about the circadian rhythm and the increase in cortisol in the morning, which should give us that get up and go. So we're primed to eat food in the morning because our digestive function, every organ in the body responds to the circadian rhythm. So we're primed to eat in the morning and eat a good breakfast. So that's why I mentioned leftovers. It's just getting our head around a different way of eating.
Yeah.
And then, tailoring off later on in the day. Although, it just depends, but having a good breakfast is really important.
Yeah.
So we're going to do children. We'll take you back to when you had your little one at little school.
Yeah.
What type of stuff? Because there's pressure on parents. There's now probably more fussy eaters than before. Have you got top tips on, oh my goodness, we've got 10 minutes to get food down.
Yes.
What are we going to be giving a primary school, so junior school aged child?
Okay. So often children do like toast in the morning. So I'd say that if your child is really wedded to their piece of toast, then you need a good piece of quality sourdough or rye bread, but lots of protein, so some scrambled eggs, mashed avocado if they'll eat it, and maybe some vegetables as well. Some cherry tomatoes.
Yep.
It could be some Greek yogurt with some berries and some nuts. A little bit of pineapple, mango, but make sure there's plenty of whole fat Greek yogurt there, which is really helpful to slow down the release of those sugars from the fruit into the bloodstream. It could be some cheese. It could be some nut butter on some apple as part of, so it's more of a meze really, breakfast, picking different things. Certainly that's the sort of things I fed my son, and that's all he ever knew. That's what he got used to very early on.
Okay, another one that we get thrown at, and I get thrown at through clients, and I'm sure you do. I'm too busy to eat lunch.
Okay.
What happens to that person's blood glucose sugar, and what should they be planning? Is it essential that we are eating lunch?
Okay. So no, you don't have to be eating lunch, and it all depends on the individual. And this is where metabolic flexibility comes into play. So if you're somebody that's used to having lunch, and say a lunch that might be a sandwich and it's got minimal protein, you will be expecting lunch, and your body will want to have lunch because your blood sugar will have dropped. So it's a case of retraining the body. So it might be that, say for instance, you didn't want to have lunch, you may have a later breakfast and an earlier dinner. So you're shortening the time between those meals, allowing you to get away with not having a lunch. And it does work for people. Or you are just changing the type of food you're having for lunch. So rather than buying that sandwich from the local supermarket, you're buying a salad box and you're buying some sliced chicken, for instance. So you've got a better option there. And it's a case of changing things slowly. So little small changes, micro habits, because it can be too much for somebody otherwise, and it's got to be sustainable.
Yes. And we should say as well, our bodies don't change instantly. It is a reprogramming. And the effect of sugar, as you've said before, is kind of a bit of an addiction.
It's a total addiction.
And our bodies are craving it. So don't pressurize yourself in literally clicking fingers and there's been a change made. What should that process look like, or how can that process work for somebody?
Okay. Well, you could... At one end of the scale, you could have something that says, I really want to make a change for the better and I just want to give up the sugar. So I'd say, well, cut out the processed foods and don't add sugar to your tea and coffee. That, you know, they're quite quick. They're
quick win, isn't it, to do that?
Wins. Because it's quite incredible how quickly we can change our palate and our cravings if we cut out the sugar. Combining, as I said, with the fats and the proteins over time, it just small changes, and like making sure you don't get too hungry as well. So I can go for quite a few hours without eating and I'm not that hungry. But for somebody else, you know, once their blood sugar drops, they need to eat. Otherwise, they're irritable. They're not good to be around. So for somebody like that, you know, they maybe need to change the breakfast that they're having, for instance, in the morning, and then making sure that they are having a lunch. But it just be small lunch until they get used to not having lunch, if that suits them. And I think it's worth mentioning, if you are the sort of person that, you know, works a job which is quite stressful, you have to bear that in mind as well, because that also drives sugar, blood glucose levels, an increase in blood glucose. As we release more adrenaline and cortisol, we're instructing the body to liberate glycogen into the bloodstream in the form of glucose, because we are in a stressful situation. Sort of, the body doesn't know that we're not fleeing that saber-toothed tiger, but the physiological response is the same as it would have been many years ago. So we will have that roller coaster, but from stress rather than food. So we can mitigate that by the types of foods we're eating, and also being mindful of actually the impact of stress on our bodies. So if you are in a stressful situation, say you've just come off a very stressful phone call, the best thing you can do is take a walk, because you'll have circulating glucose, go and walk it off, come to the gym, work it off. And I think that's why you find so many people here after work. It's such a helpful way of kind of burning off that excess fuel and cortisol.
And that's another tip, and I'm going to throw this one at you, is we're also designed to move. So we're designed to allow our digestive system to process everything that we've taken in. And especially if we're sitting at the desk and peaking that sugar and then troughing. Yes. We need to move.
We do need to move. So exercise, snacking is incredibly important. I often say to my PT clients who maybe go the whole day, you know, so many of us are desk-based. I say, you know, just get up, do some squats, lift your calves under the table, do something, move around, you know, whether it's going to the coffee machine or having a chat with your, you know, a colleague in the kitchen, just move around, get up, you know, even if it's setting a reminder on your watch to move, it's really important. And something else, just thinking about, you know, activity, the more muscle mass we have, I should mention, the better able we are to manage our glucose levels for a number of reasons. One, because muscle needs fuel to survive. So that's, you know, we're giving it the raw materials. But also, the bigger your muscle mass, the greater the fat storage, the glycogen storage potential. So we are better able to manage our glucose levels because we're able to put the glucose somewhere, i.e. in the muscles. So we are more metabolically flexible. Another reason to come to the gym and lift weights.
Yes. Come on, lifting weights. Yes. Jane, you are a little love. Thank you for coming in to chat to us. So team, if you have questions about sugar and the effects on the body, we're not going to ask Jane to then go away and give you a whole new nutritional plan. But if you've got questions, please do feel free to email us in at
podcast@everyoneactive.com,
and we will send them over to Jane. Jane, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Team, as always, please share, leave us a little review, little 5 stars or a love heart maybe.
We'd like that.
Share it.
Share the love.
But huge point is sugar is so hidden in our diets and it's really affecting the health of our nation. So please just be aware of what you are putting into your body and continue to move.
Move.
Take care, team.
Bye.
Bye.